with 2 weeks to go, the Canadian federal election is very much a two-way race. Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre have been sharpening their attacks, as you heard there, against one another, and both will have a chance to land knockout blows or escape them in this week's English and French debates. Our Sunday strategy session is back to talk about that. Kathleen Monk, Corey Tenike, and Scott Reid. And we will, in a moment, Kathleen, get to the discussion on the debate. But when we talk about it being a two-way race, and we just, left off before the break speaking about Jagmeet Singh, I'm going to play one quick clip from Jagmeet Singh this week because he was, in many instances, acknowledging, I'm not fighting to be prime minister. I'm fighting to mount an opposition to whomever forms government, a sort of demarcated point in the campaign for him. Let's take a listen.
I want Canadians to know, in this time of uncertainty, there's a lot of serious questions. What are we going to defend? How are we going to fight back? What do we need to protect? In all these questions, who's going to fight for you? And who's going to hold the government to account? And in all of this, I think Canadians know it's best when Ottawa doesn't give power, or one party doesn't have all the power. And so that's what I'm going to encourage Canadians to think about during the debates.
Strategically, why did they make that pivot, as we've come to call it, during a campaign at this point? And I point to one other number that really stood out to me today for preferred prime minister from Nanos Research. You got Carney at 48.7, Poilievre at 35, and Jagmeet Singh at 4%, just about 1.3% ahead of the Bloc Québécois leader, who doesn't even want to be prime minister.
Right. So I think part of this change is really a crystallization of their endgame messaging. I mean, we talked about this about 2 weeks ago on the show, how New Democrats really needed to focus on creating a permission structure for voters, especially for those incumbents, to come back to them. And Scott's right in what he says, that New Democrat voters are very fearful of a Conservative government, like they are fearful of Donald Trump. And so as the potential of a Conservative government moves away, and potentially it looks like it's a clear run for Carney, the case that New Democrats have to make is vote for where you have strong incumbents and potentially new candidates in particular ridings, I would say in Toronto, Halifax, a few others, where we can actually make a difference. And that we promise, as New Democrats, to use our power to help Canadians, as we have in the past. And they've been drawing extensively on this historical narrative, on the New Democratic narrative, of all the things that New Democrats have fought for when they have used their power to achieve programs for Canadians, whether that's the pension plan, whether that's health care, so many things that they fought for over the years. And so they're making this case in this end game, really crystallizing something that we spoke about on the show a couple of weeks ago, and doing this in the last few days before we, last 2 weeks of the campaign.
Well, they're taking your advice 2 weeks after you gave it. I'll say that.
I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, you would not at this juncture. No, I want to ask you, Corey, about the same thing, because I think what we will see crystallize further over the next few weeks is both parties making the case for a majority government, actually. And that, I'm wondering, in your view, could that work against the NDP as well?
Yeah, I think they're really being frozen out of the conversation right now, and I have some sympathy for the situation they're in and the one that the Bloc is in, because it's such a polarized, election campaign, largely around one big issue, and there just isn't a lot of room for third parties. And but where I think there's opportunity for the NDP is something similar to what we saw in the Ontario provincial election campaign. I think a hyper-localized campaigns where they very clearly are the alternative to the Conservative Party, that they could continue to do well in those spaces. But it would be on the basis of something like we saw in Ontario, and or frankly what the Greens tend to do. They're not running a big national campaign. They run a campaign in 4 or 5 ridings, and I think for the NDP it's like dig in as hard as you can in your incumbent seats and hope that you hold as many of them as possible.
Just really quickly, does Jagmeet Singh last, in your view, if they only...
Boy, I hope not, for your sake, Kathleen, and everyone else who supports the NDP. Look, I think he's been a very, very weak leader for them, and I come from the prairies, where I'm used to seeing the NDP being quite strong and vying for power regularly, and for whatever reason, since Jack Layton, we haven't seen the same sort of robust effort at the federal level, and Singh is not doing well, even by those standards.
Okay, well, that brings me to what is shaping up to be a debate between, in particular, Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. All the leaders will be there, to be totally fair, Scott. But, I think given everything we've just talked about, the attention will be squarely focused on the two of them. In your view, will this debate matter? Or these two debates, I should be fair and say.
Well, I think they matter a great deal. Will they change the trajectory of the campaign? I'm not sure. It will matter a great deal because I do think the nature of this election, with Donald Trump hovering over it, the weight of these issues that we're debating, you're going to find that we will have record subscriptions and attention to the debate. I really do think it's going to be a massive platform for all of the leaders. So if you're Pierre Poilievre, it's therefore literally, as cliche as it may sound, your last best chance to reverse the course of this campaign. But leaders' debates are like golf. You are actually often competing against yourself. So if you're Mark Carney, you want to focus on what's giving you that 15-point advantage on preferred prime minister. Be that guy. Don't get caught up in trying to counterpunch with Pierre Poilievre or Blanchette and French on all the attacks. And you're not going to win that game. You're not there to show that you're the best debater, the best politician, the best political wit. You are there to remind people of what has gotten you to the point where you are, which is that you are by far the most qualified person to be prime minister, and reassure Canadians and voters that you can meet that test. I think Poilievre's got a tough battle because on the one hand, he's got to dismantle Carney, but he can't look like Trump, and he often drives people away, particularly women voters, when he's his own attack dog. So he's going to have to thread that needle somewhat. Tone, I think, is going to be the real battle he's going to have. And that, again, that battle will be with himself. He's got to find a way to manage his tone so that he gets his points across, he weakens Carney, but he doesn't come off, to put it bluntly, as a screaming jerk.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like the biggest vulnerability for Carney will be, Kathleen, if he takes the bait, and the biggest vulnerability for Poilievre could be how he gives the bait.
And how he goes after his jugular. Yeah, I mean, I think with Poilievre in particular, because he has a problem, almost a double-digit point lead for the Liberals over the Conservatives with women, he has to find a way to come across in the debate, not as the same guy who kind of screams at journalists or gets angry or negative, but in fact, looks more authentic and looks like he could actually deliver for them. Because he's got to bring some of those women back into his voter universe, because they're leaving him in droves right now. Carney has been known to take the bait with journalists and with others and kind of deliver snide remarks. So the question is, will he be called onto the mat around Brookfield, some of his choices in the past, because those ultimately predict his choices in the future. Jagmeet Singh, on the other hand, he has the most experience in the debate stage, but also I think we can agree that he is the most empathetic leader and he actually can connect with viewers. So if he can do that through narrative, through storytelling, through the programs he will promote, he has a chance there. And Yves-François Blanchette always has the easiest job, at least particularly in the English debate. All he has to do is really look charming and smart, and he does, and people in the rest of Canada can't vote for him anyhow.
I want to play just one clip, because we focus so much on the Conservatives, on Mark Carney getting testy this week, because he was questioned by the Globe and Mail about a picture he took, that was taken, I should say, where he was alongside a pro-Beijing, essentially, person, and he disputed the facts as they were presented, but it was the way in which he responded I thought that was very interesting. We'll play that, and then I'll get your take, Corey.
Well, I'm sorry, but you can't believe everything you read in the Globe and Mail. So in your question, and I guess in the article in question, you said I had a meeting with whatever your term was, Beijing group. I've never heard of this group, okay? Never heard of this group. Certainly didn't have a set-up meeting with this group. Full stop. So check your sources before you write things like that, okay? Or your colleagues do.
I get when you're pushing back on something you don't think is true, for sure. But I think if a Conservative had answered that way, they would have been labeled, an affront to democracy. What does that tell you about what to watch for in this week's debate? And do you think they're going to be important?
Look, they have the potential to be important. What normally happens in debates is whoever you are supporting going into the debate, you think that's the person who won the debate. That's what normally happens, but that's not always what happens. We have seen a handful of instances where there's a real moment that embodies what the electorate's thinking about and changes people's opinions. So and I think that's the hope that the Conservatives have to have right now, is to try to create one of those moments. I think Carney's got a few big tells, and that was one of them. But whenever his personal ethics or credibility are put in the crosshairs, he reacts in a way that's similar to the clip that you just showed the audience. It's chippy, it's snarky, it's part of the thing that we were talking about with Poilievre, where he has a challenge, where you come across as a bit of a jerk. So like if I were Poilievre, I would be trying to find those raw nerves and rub them a little bit, and try to elicit a reaction where Carney, who's really getting a bit of a pass from I think a lot of the electorate, where they see something that they don't like.
I guess it's the way the nubbing happens. We shall leave it there. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Our Sunday strategy session. Scott Reed, Corey Teneycke, and Kathleen Monk.